What did he do in those 10 years? Well, his first missionary journey, you know all about it. He starts in Antioch, does the loop, comes back, goes to Jerusalem. His second missionary journey, very similar, only he enlarges it and gets across Greece and Roman province of Asia and Syria. Then he does that third missionary journey. Basically, Paul was a repeatedly visit the same people and check up how they're doing and grow them and use them and deploy them. And then, of course, his final journey, he goes all the way to prison. Now, we don't know much about Paul after this. Now, early church history has a lot about him. We know he said he was going to Spain, Tarshish. There are a lot of church historians and even apocryphal books that are written about Paul that he went all the way to Britain. But all we know is Paul was busy to the end. Basically, those that have studied his life put his whole life on one map. Now, this is what the Bible says. It doesn't have Spain, it doesn't have Britain, it doesn't have whether he went on the Via Domitia overland to Spain, and he would have gone through a lot of important cities. But basically, Paul, who gets saved in Damascus, ends up and he's executed in Rome. All along the way, though, I don't know how he had time. He's writing books under the inspiration of God's Spirit. Did you know that's a discipline? Many of them he had other people write, so he had to have someone helping him. And it could have been his eyesight, we don't know for sure. But God used Paul as a messenger to record the single greatest book of the Bible, Romans. I mean, that is the treatise on salvation. And what he does is he writes them across his ministry. Galatians, his first epistle, right after the Jerusalem Council. Then he wrote to the Thessalonians. That's on his second missionary journey. His third journey, he does the Corinthian epistles and Romans. And then during his imprisonments, see, there's the 10 years. And then he's in that decade of hard, alone suffering. And from that, Luke and Acts come. By the way, what are Luke and Acts for? Did you know Rome is the underpinning of what most of the Western world has as our judicial system? Rome had a very good legal system. Nero could not just cut off Paul's head because he was a citizen of Rome. He had to follow the rules. So Nero had Paul brought before the trial and the building is still there in Rome. It's the Basilica of Julia. We know exactly where Paul was tried. We know where Nero was. I mean, all that stuff's still there. It's fun to visit. And Paul had to come before Nero's lawyers with his case. Do you know that's part of why he was 2 years in Caesarea? Do you know what Luke and Acts are? Have you ever thought about what they are? They are the attending documents that went with Paul as he went to his trial. Every case had to have attending documents. Have you thought about what Luke is? Luke is an amazing record of Christianity. Did you know every time a Roman leader is mentioned in the book of Luke and in the book of Acts, they're noble, they're law-abiding, they're obedient. Every soldier, have you thought about how Rome is presented in Luke and in Acts? It's presented the way it was supposed to be, because this was a legal case. So basically, Nero, his lawyers, would have heard the contents of Luke and Acts before Paul stepped up for the trial. And they would have summarized it to Nero. Have you ever thought about why God saved Paul? Remember what he said to him? You're going to stand before kings. You're going to stand before these notable, you're going to suffer, you're going to die, but you're going to get to share the gospel where no one else got to share it. Wow. And so Luke and Acts are those tending documents for his case. During prison, he wrote Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, Philemon. He gets released, and then he writes his final documents, 1st, 2nd Timothy, and Titus, in that hard, alone, suffering decade.